The Michelin name is synonymous with quality around the world, yet many who appreciate the performance of numerous Michelin products are unaware that the company's first tire product was a bicycle tire in 1891, when the Michelin brothers patented the first detachable bicycle bead tire. To this day, Michelin continues to innovate and produce world-class products for road bicycles, mountain bikes, and specifically designed products for e-mountain bikes, like the Michelin E-Wild tire. It's the tire of choice for my team, the Impact Results EMTB team, that's competing in the 2021 EMTB GNCC National Championship. This partnership will enable the team and its riders to showcase the performance, versatility, and durability of the Michelin E-Wild tires during our efforts to defend and pursue even more championships. Also for 2021, Michelin is introducing many exciting new products like the Michelin Force AM2 tire and the Michelin Wild AM2 tire, designed for a variety of mountain bike terrains, as well as, this one I'm excited about, the Michelin Pilot SX and the Michelin Pilot SX slick tire, specifically for world-class level BMX racers like myself. Follow at Michelin Bicycle on Instagram or learn more about their extensive range of bicycle products by checking out their website or obviously engaging with them on social. Again, it's at Michelin Bicycle on Instagram. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. I want to talk about our friends at Just Live CBD. Support for RacerX and this podcast is brought to you by Just Live CBD. They're a trusted source for high-quality wellness CBD products created by athletes just for you. Fun fact, Travis Pastrana, ever heard of him? He may or may not know a few things about being injured, recovery, dealing with nagging pains, nagging injuries. Well, Travis is actually one of the founders of Just Live CBD, so that's pretty neat. Travis and everybody at Just Live CBD want to hook you guys up. You can get 30% off your entire order with code RACERX at checkout. Visit justlive.com. That's JUSTLIVE, justlive.com, and use code RACERX so you get 30% off your entire order.
Welcome to the Moto Marketing Podcast, presented by RacerX, the podcast for moto industry professionals, entrepreneurs, and riders. If you want to grow your brand and business in today's digital-first world, you have to know how to turn a stranger into a fan, turn a like into a customer. You have to know how to turn attention into dollars. This podcast is dedicated to keeping you in the know on real marketing tactics that work in the moto world so that you grow your business and help grow the sport. Get ready to learn from the very same marketing experts trusted by RacerX, Lucas Oil Pro Motocross, GNCC, and NBC Sports. They'll help you navigate the world of digital marketing for your moto brand. This is the Moto Marketing Podcast. Presented by RacerX.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Moto Marketing Podcast. One that I always get excited about all of our guests, but I've had a conversation with our guest today. I always have conversations with the guests before they come on. They're usually 15 minutes. This conversation went about an hour because we just hit it off and went deep, and I'm very excited for you guys to learn more about our guest today. Before we dive in, I want to tell you about RacerX's promo that they have going on right now. It's a limited time. You can subscribe for as little as 99 cents to the magazine. That is for digital only. You can get print or digital for $2.99 and get access to some awesome features that guys like Weege and Davey and Steve Mathis put into the magazine only. Right now, there's a really, really cool feature about Travis Pastrana and his family and just some behind the scenes that's called Travis Part 2. I've already seen it. Awesome feature. I highly recommend shelling out a little bit of money, supporting the media publication that does so much for the industry. It gives me a platform to talk to you guys as well, so be sure to check it out. You can use, there's tons of links. You can use anybody's link, but I recommend you use mine. It's racerxonline.com/Moto Marketing, so I can get a little bit of credit. I am going up against Steve Mathis and Daniel Blair and Jason Wygant, so if I even get 1 or 2 subscriptions, I'm extremely grateful for you guys. So anyways, into today's show, we've got an awesome guest. We've got Jay Cavanaugh. Some of you, those that are in the industry, probably know who he is. Those of you that are just fans from afar, and maybe you listen to AJ Catanzaro's podcast, you might have heard the name, RAK Racing. I had heard them talk about RAK Racing several times on AJ's podcast, and I was curious. I'm like, who is this guy? And then they had him as a guest. And then, strangely enough, he DM'd me on Instagram not long after that and said, hey, listen to your show, appreciate your content, whatever. And I was like, I got to message this guy because I really was into his content. We've got Jay with us today, and Jay and I had a great conversation last week about what he does for his athletes. And it's super applicable to not only the athletes, professional or amateur, but anybody that listens to this show can benefit from the wisdom that Jay has. He kind of had a Yoda Luke Skywalker session with me in our intro call, and I really enjoyed it. So, Jay, that's a long intro. I apologize for rambling. I'm excited to have you on today. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. And hey, anytime I'm compared to the likeliness of Yoda, I mean, I'm old enough to have seen that first Star Wars in the theaters, and if that wasn't the most amazing movie ever, I mean, I still, that was a great movie. So yeah, any Yoda relationship, I'll take it.
No doubt. Well, man, what you do is pretty special. I've learned, trying to figure out how to build a business from the time I was a senior in high school to finally figuring it out, and I'm still figuring it out. But my business partner and I went to so many conferences as we were growing this business, and there are a lot of guys that offer mindset coaching and just mental awareness and mental preparation to be successful in business. And we heard some really good stuff. And we also heard a lot of bogus BS stuff that I was like, all right, come on. Tony Robbins type events that you go to and you don't really leave there with anything that's applicable. You just feel good, and then you don't know what to do with that feeling. When I was asking you questions about your athletes, you started saying stuff that resonated with me as, yes, I'm an amateur athlete, and I take that very seriously. But on the business side of things, I was like, man, I could apply that in my business. It was just a really cool conversation. I hope we can dive into some of that. If not, we're going to do a multi-parter podcast with you, because I think we can go deep into some really cool stuff. I always like to start with a little bit about the guest and how in the heck did you get into the industry? Because that's the biggest question I get from young aspiring moto professionals is, how do I work in the sport? And a degree from college isn't the ticket in. You have to find your way in. How did you get involved initially in the sport of moto? Did you start as a fan? How did that all begin?
Sure. So, I've got a doctorate, and that certainly didn't get me in for sure. So what I used to always race. I grew up on a farm. Matter of fact, I'm living right now in the house I originally grew up in. I came back after exploring the U.S., but even right now, I can look out my window and see the field where I learned on a PW50 how to ride. And then that turned into, an 85, and then you get into racing. And then once my racing career ended in 87 with an injury that my left foot doesn't go up. So if anyone sees me, everyone always says, hey, you're limping. Yeah, I know I'm limping. I definitely know I'm limping. Trust me. It's been a long road, and I've been limping for a while. So yes, I do know. And so, I was a little hurt by that, because not so much physically, but more mentally, because I was like, of all the injuries I could have had, if there is a God, why did you take my dream away from me by taking a foot that has to go up to shift? Like, whoa. So I really got to a dark place from that, had some mental struggles from that. My family wasn't so supportive of my riding. So any chance I got to race, I felt like I had to beat everyone, because that was the only way I could maybe have someone see me and recognize me. And so I overrode, had an injury that ended that, and then took some time off. And then one day, one of my friends said, are you sure there's not a way around it? And I said, well, what do you mean a way around it? Well, either get an automatic bike or maybe set something up a different way, put the foot peg, or put the shifter on the other side, whatever it is. And what we found was that with a boot, it's so rigid that if I take my knee and put it out, my foot goes in, but it doesn't go up. But if you rotate your foot out enough, then in becomes up. Then I started getting back into racing again. Ended up becoming an expert supermoto racer, got into all that, Loudon Road Race Series, motocross. But then, you get older and you say, hey, how do I get into this sport? Not at a level as a racer, but like, how can I be more immersed in this sport? Because you're not gonna, I knew I wasn't gonna start winning races at 30 something, right? So I started off with getting a pass. I called, the AMA Pro Motocross Series back in like 06, I think it was. And I remember getting them on the call and I'm like, hey, I need credentials. They're like, who are you with? And I panicked and I was looking around and I was like, who am I with? Like, what do you mean? Like, what rider? And I'm like, and at the time, Ricky Carmichael was number one. So who did I say? I'm like, Ricky Carmichael.
That's awesome.
So anyways, I don't think they questioned me because like, who would have the guts to call up and be like, I'm with Ricky Carmichael? Like, are you really going to question me?
That's like walking into a car dealership that sells Ferraris and driving it out the front door and be like, yeah, I already paid for this. And they'd be like, oh, yeah, nobody's going to have the balls to do that, so he must have paid for it.
Oh, it was great. But hey, it was from a good place. It wasn't trying to get in or do any harm. It was actually from a good-hearted place. And so that got me in behind the scenes. And then once I got in there, I was like, well, where is the gap that I can fill with some sort of value? Now, I'm trained as an eye doctor, so, I didn't know if it was going to be like a sports vision play. I also have a background in marketing. Is it going to be a marketing play? And so as the years went on, I just immersed myself in the sport that I loved and eventually moved from, marketing, never really tapped into the vision side of it, but more so the marketing side, and then started to realize that the biggest opportunity that I saw was the mental status of the riders, and I felt like a lot of the riders I would talk to were always in this funk and this mindset where I'm like, wow, I can already tell this guy's not going to win and this guy's not going to do well. He's already talked himself out of it. And so that brought me down the road of mental coaching. And then one day I talked to AJ Catanzaro, who I'd been following around and hanging out with for a while and, crashing in his, hotel room, that kind of thing. And I said, hey, I've been working on something for a while now. Like, do you mind if I open her up at one of your classes? And so him and Tyler Bowers were teaching a class at Winchester Speed Park in New Hampshire. I said, hey, can I speak a couple times? Spoke, got my first 2 clients, and it's been a fun ride ever since.
So you had said that, you noticed the biggest area that you felt you could help or that the riders needed was in the mindset in the mental game. Where did that light bulb come from? I mean, was there something that you saw, or is it just that obvious when you're that close to the riders that they're all just head cases?
I think a lot of it was just, it was me setting the intention that I wanted to find my place and realizing that marketing at that time just didn't seem to be something that I had enough credentials for. And I didn't see anyone solving this problem. And it was a problem that what's interesting is, if you look for something, you tend to find it, right? So the second that I saw one person kind of talking themselves out of things, it kind of got on my radar. And then I started looking for people that are talking themselves out of racing, experiencing self-doubt, maybe hyper-criticizing themselves. And the more I looked for it, the more I found it, right? Mm-hmm. Almost like if you look for trouble, the more you'll find it. It's very true, and there's even a part of your brain that filters out all the stimuli in the world. Because think about how many stimuli you have at any given point. There's a part of the brain that filters all those out based on the intention and focal point that you choose. And so the more I looked for riders that were struggling mentally, the more I found them, and the more that fed the desire and the effort for me to learn more and go down that road.
So after our initial conversation, you're a master at what you do, and I'm going to try to use some examples as the show goes on. How did you go from realizing there was a need to you didn't go to school to be, some psychology specialist or whatever. that's not your background. How did you master not only understanding it, but being able to do it in a way that you provide tools? Like you can, again, I use the conferences that I went to, and the best example is it's very easy to find a football coach that can hype you up and get you ready to run through a wall when you leave that locker room, but it's not as easy to find somebody that can get you motivated and excited, but then know how to like harness that energy and steer it in the direction that they want it to go. So when that initial excitement goes away, you have no idea what to do now. Our short conversation, you provided me with some tools of how to take how I'm feeling here and put it back to where it needs to be. How in the hell did you become a master at doing that?
Well, a lot of it is just practicing with patients. As an optometrist here in Connecticut, a lot of times what I realized is what I was really doing as an eye doctor was more so psychology. You know, it was trying to get into the mind of my patient more so than it was to actually do an eye exam, right? That was more like almost like a secondary effect. And so I started realizing the power of psychology, the power of perspective, confirmation bias, cognitive biases, cognitive distortions, and just the fact that people are driven by emotions, you know, and we all are driven by emotions. Even with me becoming an eye doctor, I wanted to do it, but I wanted to be a professional racer. Like, let's be honest here. Right. Nobody wakes up and says, some people probably do, but I certainly didn't wake up and say, I want to be a doctor. That was like plan B or C, right? But it turned out to be a decent plan. But what I found was that people that came back to my office came back because they remember how I made them feel. And so I've always been like focused on feelings because I feel like feelings are everything. And I feel like, and I don't feel like, I know that thoughts control feelings, which control actions. So I know with me, any of the mistakes I've made in my life have typically been when I've been in a lower vibe or a poor emotional state, right? But then I know that if I've been in a state of joy, elation, happiness, excitement, you know, some higher level emotions up here, I haven't really made any mistakes. So I said, wait a minute. So emotions have played a big part in my success and failures, which, by the way, I embrace my failures and enjoy them just as much as my successes because I realize that that's where my opportunity is to grow, right? People put too much shame, guilt, humiliation, and embarrassment, and they attach that to failure. Those emotions are not what you want to attach to failure because then you're going to be afraid to fail, afraid to try, and the fear and doubt will creep in much easier. Yeah. When you shift your perspective to saying, hey, if I fail, now I got an opportunity to figure out what I did wrong. Right. Now I can fix it. And if I fix it, now I'm going to level up. To me, that's how you level up. You overcome that which is holding you back. And so, how did I get into giving tools? It just through School of Hard Knocks, and also realizing that after watching 1,000 YouTube videos, I get sick and tired of people telling me stuff, but like, what do I do? Yeah. You know, like, what do I do? Like, so even right now, I'm in my mind, I will give you this. Based on what I just said, what can you do with this? Anyone who's listening, just ask yourself, what's my vibe? What's my vibe? And if you ask yourself, what's your vibe? And your answer is, man, I'm kind of, I don't know. I always like to think of like a scale. Like if you're not in joy, you're kind of in here, or maybe you're down here. You say to yourself, what's my vibe? And if you don't like your vibe, what thought or your situation are you focusing your attention on that is creating that vibe? Yeah. And then that gives you an idea of awareness, which is number one in my coaching. Week one is awareness, self-awareness. Like, where am I at? How do I feel? And then when you have that, and then you link it back to the cause, which is the thought that's inspiring the feeling, and then you know that you consciously can shift your focus in a different direction. Now you have a huge tool, which is an awareness of your vibe, realizing where it came from, shifting it where it needs to go to get the desired effect you want.
Yeah. Man. Every conversation I have with you, it goes so deep. And honestly, that conversation is so deep that a lot of people handle, I don't know. When I think of, vibes and whatever, I think of, I've spoken at conferences. I'm from the East Coast, right? West Virginia. I've spoken at conferences that are in LA to where people are there and they're doing and saying the weirdest shit I've ever heard in my entire life, talking about their vibe and then I'm this guy from West Virginia and I just don't connect with it. you position it in a way to where I'm like, okay, I understand what a vibe is now, and I understand how to control it. You've just got this gift that, like, there's a subset of people that get it, or maybe they think they do. I don't know. They might just be on drugs. I'm not sure. I don't understand that group of people. But you put it in a way that I'm like, okay, this is a skill set and a tool. It's the mind, and it's the most powerful thing on earth. You put it in a way that you teach your riders how to harness that and how to be aware of, okay, I'm saying this. Like, my big thing is, I told you, man, I'm always scared. I'm always afraid it's going to go back to when I started my business, to where I was $30,000+ in debt. I was living in my office because I had nowhere else to live. This is before I had a girlfriend or was married or anything. Now we've got a 7-figure business. We've got big clients. Like, we've got multiple staff members, but there's always that thing in the back of my mind that I'm like running scared that I'm going to go back to that. And in like 30 seconds, you told me exactly what I was doing and how to be aware of it. Now, anytime that happens, I can identify it and put out that fire before it ruins my hour or the rest of my day with being distracted by stuff. Really powerful stuff. And yeah, I mean, it's crazy that, you know, I get why riders need, athletes in general need your skill, because this sport is more of a mental game than anything. And I grew up racing BMX, and I will never forget when I finally got how big the mental aspect of it was. A BMX race is 30 to 40 seconds. If you don't perform flawlessly, you're going to lose. My team manager that I was on when I was a kid, I was like 14 years old, he said a few things to me before I went up to the gate that made me think, I'm the baddest MFer on this gate. Everybody else that is on this gate with me is superior to me. I'm not afraid of them, and it's the first race I ever won. And my dad was like, what in the hell did that guy just say to you? And it was helping me harness my fear and turning it into some form of confidence, and I had clarity on what I needed to do, whereas before I was up there just terrified, thinking about this, that, and the other. Is that a lot of what you work on with your riders, as far as just like, you know, AJ's issues are probably much different than your other riders? Is it pinpointing where their weakness is and helping them harness and be aware that, okay, you're having an episode again, here's how you pull it back in? Or what does that look like?
Yeah, so there's different layers that you'll find with people that you work with. And so I almost think of like there is a actual pyramid, and at the base of that pyramid are the hardcore things like your beliefs, your values, your identity. And then above that becomes kind of like the self-talk, the conversations, like when you won that race, the conversations you have. But those conversations are built upon the foundation below of your identity and the values and what you hold true, because we don't realize it. But if you value something or you believe you are someone, there's a cognitive bias or a cognitive desire to stay in alignment with that, who you wish, or not wish, but who you believe yourself to be. Because if you don't, then you have that cognitive dissonance, right?
Yeah.
And so we always act in a way that supports who we believe. So if I, for example, believe I'm a kind man, then if I'm walking by a woman who's 90 years old putting her groceries in the back of her car, my action will be to offer assistance. If I believe that the world is a negative, harmful place and everyone's out to get me, I will continue walking by that woman. So notice how those two different beliefs completely changed the actions that I took in that same exact experience or event in life, right? Yeah. And so at the core, when I ask riders, like, you know, who do you believe you are? Or what type of person are you? Or who do you believe yourself to be? What you do is you start to really, and that's the deep work. That's usually not week 1, week 2. That's once I build up a relationship with someone. And oftentimes I'll start to see things like, the most common ones are, I'm not good enough. Mistakes and failure are bad. Those are the two biggest ones, where you start to realize that some riders have this deep-seated belief that's unconscious. So they don't even know about it, but every action and conversation they have in their mind stems from that foundation. And so if you want to do the hard work, that's the level you go. You go to the level of identity and beliefs and values. Yeah. That's where the gold is, but that's also where there's deep mining involved, right? So you really got to put in the time and effort. And so a lot of times when I'm working with someone, I try to start a little bit more gentle at the top of that pyramid. So for example, when you talk about fear, what's fear? And oftentimes we have this idea of what fear is, that it's this negative thing. And there can be negative consequences from believing your fears or believing fears as facts when in actuality they may be fiction. However, fear is based on a very, very important need that we had about 1 million years ago, which is in order for you and I, our great-great-great-great-grandfathers to stay alive, when we're out in the wilderness and there's saber-toothed tigers or God knows what's roaming around trying to eat us, fear was the number one thing that kept us alive. And so think about it. As a species, we needed to reproduce. That's it. Reproduce, evolve, like that's it. Like you don't need to have likes, followers on, YouTube. Like there was none of that. It was just straight up, be alive, reproduce. And so fear was the best thing to keep us alive. That emotion kept us from going around that corner, from taking that chance, from being like Travis Pastrana's great-great-grandfather, who would have just zung around the corner and said, you know what? I don't know what's around the corner, but let's just send it and let's see if we can get some blueberries and some fish. No, like that's why his great-great-grandfather's not around anymore. Shouldn't say that. But anyways, you get my point. And so the safety of saying, hey, wait a minute, let's not go. Right. That is where fear is based. Yeah. And so when you start to learn the value of fear and realize it's a remnant of what served us 1 million years ago, and now it no longer serves us, now all of a sudden you start to say, hey, failure is not like a fiend. It's almost like a friend that I still hang around with and dance with on occasion, but doesn't really have a purpose for me modern day. Yep. Then that starts the process of you saying, wait a minute, what's the opposite of fear? It's faith. And then you look through when that example that you gave earlier, I said, hey, are you looking through the lens of faith or the lens of fear? The lens of fear is not knowing what the future holds, but thinking things are not going to work out. Yep. The lens of faith is looking through to the future, not knowing what things are going to happen, but believe they are going to work out. Yeah. Right. And so it's a choice. Yeah. Which lens you want? You can't predict the future. Right. Yeah. So why not choose the lens of faith? And so the only reason why we're always fighting against the default of fear is because it's trying to keep us alive. But that emotional limbic system that we have is so deep ingrained, it's going to take another 1 million years if we're still around to outpace that. But until then, we have to just manage that which we have.
Yeah, man, it's interesting stuff. I mean, it's something that it's a tool. I mean, if you know how to leverage it, it's a tool. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Jay. Before we take a break, I want to let everybody know we are looking for talented individuals that might be interested in working in the industry on the Impact team. Impact Results is my marketing and media company. We do digital advertising for brands like Racer X, Lucas Oil Pro Motocross Series, FMF. If you're interested in being part of a marketing team or being part of a sales team that works in this industry, I encourage you to shoot me an email. It's luke@thinkimpact.com. It's THINKIMPAKT.com. Or just look me up on Instagram and send me a DM, ask for some information, tell me what you're interested in, and we'll get you set up to go through the interview process. We'd love to help more people realize their dream of working in the industry. We've got an awesome team here. We're hiring all around the country as well. So we'll be right back with Jay Cavanaugh from RAK Racing. Fly Racing's 2021 line has been improved and expanded, offering the industry's widest range of moto and off-road products. Led by the revolutionary Formula helmet featuring Rheon technology, Fly Racing has taken big steps forward with the all-new Light Pant and Zone Pro goggle. It's going to debut this year at the Monster Energy Supercross by Justin Brayton and the Muck Off Honda team. The Zone Pro goggle delivers premium performance from a brand you know and trust, fearless pursuit, Fly Racing. It's personally the gear that I wear. I've worn it moto, BMX, mountain bike. I've worn it and repped it for years. In my opinion, it's the best. Be sure to check out their goggle, their helmet, and all their gear. Fly Racing. Hey, big shout out to our friends at FMF. Little D and the guys are always doing some pretty exciting things, not just with the performance products, but man, they've got the coolest apparel in the game, and I want to give you guys an opportunity to get that at a little bit of a discount. If you go to FMF and pick up any gear you'd like, hats, shirts, whatever it is, upon checkout, if you enter the code MMP30, MMP30, you can get 30% off. So MP30 at checkout and get 30% off your order on FMF Apparel. All right, welcome back. Awesome interview we have going on with Jay Cavanaugh with RAK Racing. Jay, I've got to ask, because I've got a couple of questions that I've always wanted to ask somebody, and you're the guy to ask. So before I get to those, this is called the Moto Marketing Podcast. I made fun of myself before we hit record. I sometimes get distracted with just business conversation. I don't ask about marketing a lot. Mistake on my part. Branding error. Your industry is very unique. You're not the only guy that helps athletes like this. You're absolutely one of the best. So the folks that work in your space, one of the biggest hurdles you guys probably have is you really can't say who you work with for the most part. And that was actually something I was curious about, and I asked you in our first conversation, yeah, I'm not allowed to share who my clients are. And it makes sense because athletes don't want other athletes to know who their secret weapon is, and people probably look at it as a weakness. One of the things I do, and I just did it before we went to break, I name drop, right? We work with Racer X, Lucas Oil Pro Motocross, 7, FMF. I can use these names, Arma. I can use these names because they've given us permission, and it helps me build credibility. You're not able to do that. How does somebody like yourself brand and market and promote yourself when you're not really allowed to say, hey, I'm working with Eli or Kenny or Cooper, and I have no idea if you're working with any of those guys because you're not allowed to really say beyond AJ. How does that fit into your plan? Because you are a marketing guy.
Yes.
You're kind of handcuffed with what you're trying to market. So how does that work for you?
Sure. So a lot of it is the beauty of our industry being so small is that word does travel. And so early on, I think just having my face there and just having conversations with people, what I used was just giving someone one pearl every time I met them. Because if we go back to what I said earlier, that people always remember how you made them feel. So what I would do is I would go around, and if I talked to someone like in the pits or maybe in the tunnel or, after a race or track walk, whatever, I've always had conversations where I'd like to try to add some sort of value, and people say, wow, this is a valuable person. He said something pretty profound. I got to keep an eye on who that guy is, right? Just at least get on people's radar. So I think that was one strategy that worked well for me. And certainly Red Bull Straight Rhythm, I was the title sponsor for AJ Catanzaro when he was when we embodied James Bubba Stewart in 2017, 18, 19, whatever. No, I'm so bad at years. I think it was 17, 18. Yeah, 18. Yeah. Whatever. Yeah. And then also 18. Tyler Bowers, when we raced against Travis Pastrana, I was the title sponsor for that with RAK Racing. So RAK Racing has been gotten a lot of exposure, thankfully, from Red Bull. Thank you, Red Bull. Anyway, so that was really helpful. I mean, the views and the, that people always recognizing me, be like, oh yeah, I know who you are. Like, I've seen you around. So I think a lot of people know the face, but they don't always know, like, what's this guy do? So that certainly helped. AJ's explosion in the last year or two with his coaching programs and his YouTube channel has definitely helped. AJ has been open about him and I talking with each other and working together in different levels. And so that has helped for sure. Yeah. And, the honest truth is I kind of like always being the underdog. I like clawing. Like, I know, even in the last week, it's crazy. I found out 2 people that are my competitors that I wasn't even aware who they were. So then I started stalking them, and I'm like, wow, this is great. Because when you have a girlfriend, you don't have to stalk girls on Instagram anymore because you already have a girlfriend. So your stalking kind of has to be put on the back burner. But I'm like, hey, I can stalk again. Find out what makes these guys tick. What do they have on me? Or what do I have on them? Right. It's always so easy to say, oh, what does this guy got on me? It's more so like, what's my opportunity to improve? And so, that's kind of where I've gone with it. And then I'm writing a book. And I think that's going to be my next credibility play. But the book I'm writing right now is not moto related. It's outside of the industry. Yeah. But this book after that will be inside the industry.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting because, we haven't talked much about it on the show, but you do have a background in marketing. So it'd be like me, being in digital marketing and then being in a space that I really can't promote and some of our clients we can't talk about. They don't want to talk about, or, we do have some that we're working with their competitors and they just don't really want that out there. And I understand that. So that would be frustrating, but it's cool how you have to get creative with it. Okay, so there's been a lot of talk. We're recording this in May 20th. The Nationals are getting ready to start. We just wrapped up Supercross, and right now there's a lot of talk about how Cooper Webb mentally defeated Ken Roczen, and I agree. And I think that scenario is cute. But I like to look back at the Ryan Dungey, Jason Lawrence, and I think if that was as fresh in everybody's memory as this was, the mental games that Cooper played on Ken were certainly something to talk about. But my God, when Jason Lawrence and Dungey, when that all went down, now there wasn't social media, they weren't in the spotlight 24/7 like the riders are now, but I'm curious to get your take and opinion on that scenario, more so than the Kenny Cooper scenario. What was your take on J-Law and then someone like Dungey, who went on to be a great champion, but I think showed that he was mentally weak? Maybe that changed. What's your take on that scenario then, and then how those riders kind of evolved over their careers?
When you say this scenario then, are you talking about
the year that J-Law really got in Dungey's head for the Lights West title? And then obviously J-Law went off the rails, and Dungey went on to become one of the all-time greats. I was a huge J-Law fan. I always liked the bad guy. Conor McGregor's, Floyd Mayweather. I always liked the bad guy. So I was a giant J-Law fan. Now understanding what it is that you do, I'm like, my God, now was J-Law mentally tough, or was he just a complete asshole that nobody picked on? That's kind of, I'm curious, when you look at that, I'm sure you just analyze people and see things they could do differently and better. What do you see from that scenario, whatever year that was? I'm drawing a blank on it.
Well, keep in mind, any of my opinions on that would be from an outsider's point of view, because I was not inside of Jason Lawrence's rig at that time, nor was I directly working with, Ryan Dungey at that point. But what I can say from an outsider's perspective on what I saw was, and this is just this is also more a general statement perhaps, but based on that, and also ties in, I think, with Roczen and Cooper Webb, which I think is why you brought that up, which is, where are you focusing your energy and attention? Because the way that I look at it is, and this is the example I give with my riders, I say, every day you wake up, you got 5 gallons of gas. Okay. You got 5 gallons. It's a limited resource. Your energy and attention is a limited resource. So where are you going to pour those 5 gallons? Are you going to pour them into focusing on Jason Lawrence? Are you going to focus them on putting in effort into your mental skills training, maybe your physical training, maybe your nutritional, maybe even just your skill set, right? Because we always want to pull from 3 circles, right? You have the mental, then you have the master of craft, which is like, how good are you as a rider? And then you have the physical and nutrition. So you always want to be looking at those 3 circles and saying, am I going to pour gas here today or here? Where am I going to put my energy, attention, and focus? Now, when you start riding against another rider and you're putting your energy and attention and focus on them, you're giving them 1 gallon's worth of gas. Now you're down to 4. So you've let go of 20% of your resources and you put it on them. Yeah. That is not the best use of resources, right? And so I think a lot of times when you start to focus on others, which, by the way, this is probably one of the top 5 concerns that riders have, is they always start to compare themselves to others. You go down this rabbit hole of just disempowering yourself, because the power for you is within what you can control. But I, as a rider, I can T-bone you, I can talk smack. Think of all the things I can do that you can't control. But what you can control is whether you react or respond to me. Mm-hmm. The difference is this: a reaction is default. All of a sudden, Luke, you tell me, hey man, you look like crap in that blue shirt, and what's up with that pink thing behind you? Well, what do you mean? What do you mean pink thing behind me? You got a problem with me or something? That's a reaction, right? It's automated. I'm not thinking. There's no gap. I'm just immediately kind of taking it personal. And then that's where people make mistakes. Now, a response is just almost waiting for that, taking a breath for like 1, 2, maybe even 3 seconds and say, how would I like to respond to this? That's all I ask myself. How would if you said something offensive to me, I would stop for a moment and then say, how would I like to respond? I know that this is a reflection of you, not me. You coming at my pink lit up, whatever thing, right? That's a reflection of you. It has nothing to do with me.
Right.
So then therefore I choose to respond instead of react. Now, Cooper Webb, you'll watch him, he tends to respond and not react, you know? And so Kenny, I think, is a little more reactive, right? Mm-hmm. And so you can see that in the play with those two. And also I think Dungey also tended to ruminate and not let things go. So we also have letting go and attachment, right? So if you say something to me like, Jay, you're a horrible rider, I can accept it and bring it in and tag it with a very strong emotional tag, which is like, for example, let's say you say that and I say, oh, wow, I have a lot of shame and guilt and anger from what you said. Now what I've done is I've taken that comment you had and I added value to it. When I say add value, what I'm referring to is I added value through an emotional label or meaning that I placed on what you said. Right. Now that's going to make it harder for me to let go of it, right? Like if you T-boned me, you're trying to take me out, you're trying to ruin my career. Whoa. I'm just trying to get ahead of you.
Yeah. Okay.
But the rider who puts that large meaning on things and that large emotional tag is going to be attached to that incident, that event, that experience in life. And it's going to be much, much harder to break free and let go. If you proactively manage the emotional tag and meaning you place on things, like, hey, you're just having a bad day, man, I can let it go. If all of a sudden you come in and T-bone me, I could be like, hey, that's how he's got to ride to get by me, whatever, I can let it go. So that is a huge skill that riders need to master, because a lot of times people can't hit the reset button. And if you look at it, you'll see some riders that ride so emotional, and they ride emotional and they don't realize that they are not letting go as fast as they should. They're not hitting the reset button. And then that emotional state of anger, frustration, which is what I call like a lower vibe emotion, creates decision-making that is poor. You'll see it. I'm not going to name riders, but there's classic riders that do this all the time, and they are fast and they're top pros and they're amazing, but they do it all the time. They ride through that emotion and then they make mistakes that are based on the emotional state. If they had let go a little bit faster and did not become attached and just rode their own race and control what they can control, they could detach, raise the vibe, not make poor decisions, and move forward.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So we're talking about confidence, and that makes me think of, I mean, you know, Cooper Webb, who we're seeing is becoming one of the all-time greats, especially in the Supercross side of things. We look back a few years ago, and this is a guy that everybody was having the same conversation about him that they're having about Aaron Plessinger, to where he's on a Yamaha, he just came off of one of the greatest lights riders, and now he's doing terrible. How does a rider like that, who makes what seems like a massive change, it could be a small change to him, I don't know, change his teams, his training program, bikes, and now he immediately becomes great when I think a lot of people had written him off? Is that really the Yamaha and now he's on the KTM? Or was there something mentally there, do you think? Or if it is the bike, like how did he go from everybody thinks I suck, nobody believes him anymore, to where he is just the baddest dude that you can't break now? It's a different person. How does that happen? Is it a gift that he has, or how does that happen?
Well, I think Cooper Webb is definitely mentally tough, and I believe he's put in the time and effort, and and also don't forget, he rides with that chip on his shoulder, which he's not been afraid to share that. And so I think he always is looking to prove himself, but it's okay to want to prove yourself, but you don't want to always be proving yourself from a place of lack and separation and embarrassment. You want to do it from a source or because I'm big on emotions, right? And so if I'm doing it, and emotions, just so you know, have a frequency, not to get into this and get too foo-foo, but an emotion of anger, guilt, humiliation is low, meaning like, let's say it has a value of 100, right? Or 50. But when you get into like excitement, courage, pride, let's say it's 250. Okay. So when you're riding and if you're trying to overcome some of the obstacles you have, but your emotional state is here, no different than the example I just gave, your decisions and that separation and that lack that you feel is going to hold you back, and the decisions you make are going to be poor. Once you kind of change the way that you look at it. Like if you look at, let's say you're on Team Yamaha and they're not giving you a bike that you are winning on yet. Well, you have to shift your perspective on it and say, well, what are the things I can control and manage and focus? And where do I find this elusive word that all riders are always looking for? And I challenge you all to listen to the TV broadcast, the word comfort. The word comfort comes up time and time and time again. I just couldn't get comfortable. Hey, how come you were in second and you dropped back to, seventh? I just couldn't get into that comfortable place, or hey, why'd you win? Well, I just felt comfortable. So if you really want to talk about what's most important about this conversation that even trumps that, it's like at the top, is the word comfort.
Yeah.
And the word comfort comes from being able to, a lot of it is certainty, familiarity. Think about it. If all of a sudden you go to a new restaurant or you try something new, you go to a new job, what happens? Anything new creates some level of stress. Why? Because it's unknown. And your brain wants to predict the future. Your brain is always looking to keep you safe, alive, so you can reproduce. That's its goal. Yeah. Believe it or not, that's the most basic thing it wants to do. But the predictability part, a lot of times we want to predict our future, which is why we set expectations. We want to predict our future so bad. We'll be like, I predict I'm going to get a top 3. What's the reason for even predicting it? You can't predict the future, but we want consistency, familiarity, and comfortability so much that oftentimes when we try something new, try something different, something uncertain, unfamiliar, and unknown, we misinterpret that as being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. But the truth is that's where opportunity lies. That's where possibility lies. That's where you improving and going and just launching your career lies. And so I think a lot of times we need to change our perspective and be very aware of the word comfort and how we interpret it.
Yeah. Yeah, man, it's when you hear a lot of the stuff you say and we kind of attach it to scenarios like, Cooper Webb or anything like that, it's interesting. And, I encourage people that haven't already done this, but when you're watching these athletes, mid-season and if you follow the interviews post-race and kind of look for some of the things that Jay's pointed out. And I think the biggest thing is, look, I blur the lines between entrepreneur and athlete, and I do it on purpose because when I stepped away from racing for about 6 years, I got the fattest I'd ever been, miserable, hated my life, hated this company. I didn't want to come back. And it was because I just had a job and I wasn't able to perform because the only thing I was focused on was that job. So when I started to bring, BMX racing and now mountain biking back in, it helps me get in really good shape, but it prepares me mentally. When I'm suffering in a bike race, I know if I've suffered through that, I can suffer through a hard scenario in a situation here. So I purposely blur those lines. So a lot of what Jay has talked about as far as things that he works with his athletes on, it's really applicable to you as an entrepreneur or you as an intrapreneur, somebody that works for a company, or you as a student. It's the same things that you're working with your athletes. We go through them in our daily lives, right? Overcoming adversity. It's all the same stuff. It's just that's their place of work is on the racetrack. So there's a lot of what you put out. And what's cool is your Instagram, you do put a lot of stuff out that you point scenarios and situations out and you kind of explain them and break them down, and it's really cool. So if you're an entrepreneur, if you're an employee, whatever, I encourage you to consume the content that Jay puts out, and we'll talk about where you can find that in just a second because it is applicable and it's not, you don't have to be Cooper Webb or AJ Catanzaro to apply this kind of stuff. Jay, I appreciate you coming on. There's so much more we could have covered. I would like to do another episode with you just because I think we could go deep into a lot of different things that apply to the people listening and really maybe break down some scenarios of things that are going on in current day sport. If that's something you'd be interested in, I'd love to do it. Where can people consume more of your content, learn more about you or your programs? Where can they find you?
Probably the most active place I'm at is RAK Racing on Instagram. So keep in mind, RAK is RAK. It stands for Random Acts of Kindness. We actually have a nonprofit where we take a portion of the money and the revenue that we earn from the mental skills coaching. We do Random Acts of Kindness with it. That went from just doing Random Acts of Kindness to actually turning into a 501(c) legitimate nonprofit. Obviously, the pandemic kind of cut down our Random Acts of Kindness, but we are going to get back into that. And so RAK Racing, and then also So RAK, Random Act of Kindness, just don't use the C, you'll never find me. And then also RAK-racing.com is also another way you can reach out. But yeah, and just one final thing I want people to know is if there's one skill that I could leave you with, and one like take home simple thing to start with, is just become aware and become the observer of your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. Become the observer of you, not from a place of judgment and critique, but just be aware. You're like, and I always do this. If I have a weird, odd reaction, I'm like, that was interesting. That's the level of my judgment. That was interesting. But what you start to do is you start to disconnect and realize like, wow, I have a pattern of way of thinking and responding and reacting. Then you can slowly start chipping away at that and saying, hey, I want to do more of this because it serves me, but I want to do less of this because it does not serve me. And I think if there was one take-home message, that would be the one I would want to leave you guys with. Become the observer of you, and you are not your thoughts. So just realize that.
Yeah. Man, it's awesome. Man, I seriously enjoy our conversations. I'm looking forward to the next one, and I really appreciate you coming on the show today. This was awesome.
Thanks for having me. And who's the number one helmet there? Is that Hannah? What is that?
This is Hannah. This is RC, and the majority of this stuff is on loan from Racer X's office. It's pretty much like a museum. So Davey took me through the office and was like, here, take this, and he threw, this is signed by Bob Hannah. Like, there's some really cool stuff in here. It's pretty neat.
Hey, where can we find you on Instagram?
Yeah, at Luke Nesler. Man, that's the best place. We try to put some interesting if you like bicycles and motorcycles, that's a good spot.
I love it.
Awesome, man. Hey, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for listening to the Moto Marketing Podcast. If your goal is to get real, measurable results from your marketing that will grow your company revenue, then check out how Impact Media can get the same results that they have for Moto's most iconic brands by visiting thinkimpact.com. That's THINKIMPAKT.com. Have a marketing question that you want answered on the show? Send your questions to questions@motomarketingpodcast.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And we'll catch you on the next episode of the Moto Marketing Podcast.